It is Phil Steele's College Football 24. Some of us have collected these for years and years, but the latest edition is out. It's at your Barnes & Noble, and guess what? The man, the myth, the legend, Phil Steele joins us now. Happy holidays, and welcome, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and appreciate you having a collection of the magazines.
Hey, let's. I know you're a little limited on time, but I would like to start on page 1, and then we'll go to page 352. So let's break down your welcome message, and then let's talk as your favorites for the Heisman.
Yeah.
Hey, but in all honesty, so a lot of people share pictures with you when they're either a member of the VIP club, so they either get the digital one or they get the early one in their mailbox, which I was glad to receive. Or they're hounding the heck out of their favorite Barnes & Noble, but they will share pictures of where they are reading it. And I know that you repost them and you go, whoa, what is some of the most unique places that you have seen your readers read the magazine?
Yeah, we get a lot of beach ones, which I love looking at, seeing everybody just reading them at the beach. I'm trying to think of, I'd like to say that there was a couple overseas that might have been, but it's an honor to have these people go out and snap those pictures, and I always like looking at the scenery in the background.
Well, and Phil, this is what I always enjoy hearing from you when it comes to what is put into each season's breakdown. And as you've told us many times, with the transfer portal, with being able to get your hand on the rosters and get a better understanding of what that team is going to look like becomes more and more challenging with key roster additions. But we get new college football fans every year, and they hear people like us talk about Phil Steele's magazine and the preview and all the great things that you're going to get out of that. How have the last 2 years for you and just getting it together, still trying to hit that deadline, but also to get as much intel that people expect to have from your magazine every year? How challenging has that been the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's been a big difference. And in fact, we used to be able to go to the press in the middle of May and have the rosters completely set. Spring practice is over. Everybody's roster. You go to the press. Now the portal was open all the way through April 30th this year. And that, so a lot of magazines actually went to the press prior to the portal being open or closed, I should say. But we not only waited for the portal to close, we had to find out where these players landed. So I went to the press June 7th, wow, which is the latest we've ever gone to the press. But that gave 5 full weeks, and pretty much anybody that was worth signing signed in that span. So we were able to capture it. But it made us push back the magazine deadline a couple of weeks to make sure we had everybody on the right page for the right team this year. I had coaches texting me 3 days before we went to the press. Hey, we just signed this guy. Hey, we just signed this guy. But it's a 7-month process putting this magazine together, but well worth it.
Let's start with Nebraska, Phil, because there have been times you've been high on Nebraska, and then it hasn't come to fruition. You are, even with the net close losses, the turnovers, you have a lot of the metrics that you're high on Nebraska again. Why, whether it be your metrics or just you as a football guy, think that this year will be different, where Nebraska football finally will turn the corner?
Well, 2 words, Matt Rule. I think, when you look at Matt Rule with the job he did at Temple, the job he did at Baylor, year 1 to year 2, remarkable turnarounds, going 5 wins, plus 4 wins. And I got to tell you, in my net close loss, net wins, net losses article, Nebraska has been like the outlier of it, because generally when a team has a lot of close losses the next year, about 75% of the time they have a much better record. Nebraska's been that one team that just continues to have close losses each and every year. But you got to figure that ends this year. And first of all, I think you look at the talent on this year's team and what Matt Rule is putting together. They have my number 5 rated defensive line in the country, my number 19 set of linebackers. So the defense is going to be solid. And it was solid last year. I mean, they only gave up 304 yards per game, 18.3 points per game. So you've got one of the top defenses in the country, led by Nash Hutmacher. And so I'm very high on the defense. And offensively last year, let's face it, they had trouble throwing the football. I mean, when you complete 52% of your passes, you got 10 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, you got a problem. But this year, bringing in a Dylan Raiola from the true freshman, who looked great in the spring. Now, I don't know if he's going to look that great all season, but I do expect a very good year out of him. They've got the running backs back, and the running backs were banged up last year. Remember, they lost Irvin out for the year after 3 games. Johnson was out after 2 games. Irvin's 220 pounds, yet one of the team's fastest. You look at the receiving core, they'll be much improved this year. Why? Because they've got a quarterback that can throw the football to him, and then the offensive line has 152 career starts, which ranks number 8 in the country. So you add all that together, I like the talent. You've got Matt Rule. And then let's factor in the schedule this year as well. The Huskers avoid Michigan, Oregon, and Penn State in Big Ten play. I like that. And in fact, if you look at the first 7 games this year, guys, UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, home to Illinois, at Purdue, home to Rutgers, at Indiana. I could see this team starting 7-0 this year. And if they are 7-0, they're playing with a lot of confidence when they travel to face Ohio State on October the 26th. They do have to play USC on the road, Iowa on the road, all in those last 5 games. But I think this is the year they break through. And if you look at Matt Rule, he's had the close losses his first year at teams, and then it reverts the second year as well. So that's going to be the key this year.
When you factor in everything you just laid out there with Nebraska, and when it comes to power rankings, we were talking about this last week, that you're high on Iowa as well. So if we were to look at a potential ceiling for Nebraska, how close is it, in your opinion, to where you can project Iowa's ceiling being essentially a college football playoff team?
Close. I do think Iowa's got the better shot right now, but when you look at Nebraska, the ceiling, I would put it 10 or 11 wins this year. It was funny. When I was talking to Coach Rule, I said, "Okay, Coach, you average going up like 5 wins per year your second year. So 10 wins this year?" And he's like, "Those are your words, Phil, not mine." But I do think Nebraska has a very high ceiling, especially if you start 7-0. But let's talk about Iowa for a minute and why I'm so high on Iowa this year. First of all, they're number 4 on my experience chart. They're one of the most experienced teams in the country. You look at them defensively, I thought Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, all were gone. But no, they're all back for their another year, turning down the NFL. This is a nasty defense. They still got that guy at defensive coordinator, too, Phil Parker. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he always puts together a top-notch defense, and they are one of the best in the country. In fact, I rate them the number 2 defense in the country. Offensively, that's where their problem has been. Cade McNamara, Brendan Sullivan. I think they've got 2 capable quarterbacks. Keep McNamara healthy is going to be the key. They've got the running backs with LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson. You look at the offensive line, they've struggled the last couple of years, but you look at this year's line, all 5 starters are back. They have some threats at wide receiver now. And so I think I was going to actually have an offense to go along with the defense, and they have one of the top 10 special teams as well. Then you look at their schedule. They avoid Michigan, Oregon, Penn State in the Big Ten play. The only game I've got them an underdog in all year is at Ohio State. I have them a favorite in all the rest of their games. So I'm looking at Iowa as having a great shot. They don't have to pull an upset to make the playoff.
What gets in the way of Ohio State?
Possibly Oregon. They have to play them in Autzen Stadium, which is one of the toughest venues in the country. Other than that, you can't see a lot of roadblocks because they're going to have to find the quarterback. Will Howard did a great job at Kansas State. I think they're going to run the football a lot more out of the quarterback position, and they're deep there. They've got Aaron Nolan and Julian Sand coming in as a true freshman. Devin Brown can run the football. They've got the running back core. My biggest concern, not only Oregon in Autzen Stadium, and Oregon's loaded this year, by the way, but Georgia. Georgia, to me, is the most complete team in the country. When you look at the Bulldogs, they go 3 deep at every single position. In fact, a lot of their third-teamers would start for a lot of other teams in the country. So, but Ohio State deserves to be the favorite in the Big Ten.
More reluctance on liking but not loving USC, in your opinion. Is it no Caleb Williams, even though you got a chance to see a small dose of their new quarterback, or the fact that there wasn't a lot done with that defensive line for USC?
Yeah, I think with USC, they're going to have a better record than last year. I don't know if they're going to be a contender in the Big Ten, but I do think they'll have a better record. I like what I saw at Miller Moss in the bowl game. I mean, anytime you throw 6 touchdown passes, you're doing having a heck of a game. And they also have a pretty good backup there in Jaden Maeva. You know, this guy that Lincoln Riley knows offense. They'll have a potent offense. I do like the defensive improvement they're going to show this year with Anton Lynn coming in as a defense coordinator, bringing a lot of guys from UCLA with them. I like the fact they kept Bear Alexander. There was a point where it was like, oh, Bear Alexander's transferring, and he stayed there. I think with Bear Alexander, with that much upgraded back seven, they're going to have an improved defense, but USC's not going to have a top 25 defense. They'll be improved, but they're not going to be great on defense.
Hey, there's a polarizing guy in this league because of his personality and now where his program is after a 6-7 season. What's your thoughts on PJ Fleck and Minnesota's trajectory in 24 and beyond?
Well, you know, when I talked to Coach Fleck, going over the team with him, he's pretty confident on this year's squad. I didn't pick him as high. I've got him down there at number 15. They do play a really tough schedule. Anytime you get teams like Penn State at home, USC at home, Iowa at home, those are games they're probably going to be an underdog in. That means the winnable games, the one are mostly on the road, the Illinois, the Rutgers, the Wisconsin. So I wasn't wild about their schedule in the Big Ten. It doesn't set up well, but they are a much more experienced team, number 39. On my experience chart, I think last year they got poor quarterback play. This year, Max Brosmer comes in from New Hampshire. I think he's going to give them solid quarterback play. You know they're going to be able to run the football. They've got an outstanding offensive line, almost everybody back from last year. And defensively, Coach Fleck mentioned about 5 guys he felt had NFL caliber on the defense, especially up front when they had Logan Redding and Devin Eastern. You look at the linebacking core with Lindenberg and Strigow. You look at the secondary with Justin Wally. So they have talent. I just wasn't wild about the schedule, but Coach Fleck is confident on this year's team.
Out of these two teams, because their record was essentially the same, the difference between one win, and that's Michigan State and Indiana, both with new coaches, Kurt Cignetti with Indiana, and then Jonathan Smith with Michigan State. Who, from a roster, but also just from the coaching and the fit, do you think has a better chance to improve their stock from just last year?
Not even close. I'm going Indiana. I'm all in on Indiana this year. You look at Michigan State, they've got the tougher schedule. Jonathan Smith lost a lot of talent. I love what Jonathan Smith did at Oregon State. Go back to the first time I talked to him there. His roster could barely go too deep. In fact, didn't go too deep at some positions. He's inheriting the same type of thing here at Michigan State. They don't have a great roster. They do have 10 starters back on D. He'll get the most out of it, but I don't like their schedule either. However, Indiana, much improved this year. In fact, they're number 4 on my most improved list. And what I like about them, first of all, Coach Cignetti has never had a losing season, and he's a highly confident coach. Doesn't feel that he feels that they will absolutely have a winning season. He even said a couple times that felt they might be a contender in the Big Ten. I don't know if I'll go quite that far with them, but they bring in Curtis Rourke at quarterback from Ohio, who's a winner. He's been a first-team All-MAC quarterback. They've got a deep running back core, transfers from Wake Forest, James Madison, 2 transfers from James Madison, North Carolina. You look at the offensive line, it looks solid. Defensively, he had one of the best defenses with James Madison, brought a lot of those players with him. And then the schedule sets up beautifully for Indiana. It's one of the best schedules in the Big Ten as well. They do play Ohio State, Michigan, but avoid all the other big boys. They get a lot of the big games at home this year. I think Indiana has the potential to even triple last year's win total, going from 3 to as many as 9 wins this year if everything falls into place.
Phil Steele joining us here for a couple more moments. The preview is out. You can find it at Barnes & Noble across the country. If not, just call up Phil. What's your thoughts on Colorado? Because you've been around this for a long time. We've never really seen anything that's like in college football, the way the roster is handled or a celebrity head coach. Last year, 133rd in experience. This year, they're up to 48. He's talking big things. They need to at least get to a bowl. What do you see with Colorado, especially, Phil, as you know, they come into Lincoln on week 2?
Yeah, and I wasn't high on Colorado last year, and then out of the gate, they open up 3-0, and I'm like, oh, my goodness, I was really wrong on this team. I was damn. And then at the end of the year, they finished up 4-8. So then it would seem a little bit better in that respect. I think this is a team that just has too much transition going on. I mean, it's basically a new squad every year, and they brought in another new squad this year. They do have Shedeur Sanders back at quarterback, and he's dangerous, but he's got to take less sacks. They lose their entire offensive line from last year, bringing another new offensive line. I don't know how that's going to work out. I do like the receiving corps. They've got some weapons there. I like their quarterback. They brought in a lot of transfers on defense, but how they can all acclimate together and come together as a team is a big-time question. I actually have Nebraska a 10-point favorite over Colorado in that game. So I think that Colorado has another season similar to last year. Will Deion stick around once Shedeur is gone to the NFL? We'll see, but I'm not that bullish on Colorado this year.
Phil, I want to ask you about this team, which does not ever make any major waves when we talk Big Ten football. But Gary and I agreed on this part of Nebraska's schedule, and I want to get your thoughts. Rutgers in 2024 and what type of team they project to be.
Yeah, I love talking to Coach Schiano. I love the way he's building this team, huh? I mean, he's building it to be strong at the line of scrimmage. Says this year's offensive line's getting close. It's almost to where he wants to be, but he was at Ohio State, so he wants it to be that type of offensive line. They've got a really good offensive line. Now, Kelly McManus is a guy that comes in a quarterback. He struggled at Minnesota last year, but Coach Schiano feels that he's got they've got Soroka back there as the offensive coordinator. Kelly McManus did well under Soroka when he was there. They've got Kyle Monangai, one of the most underrated running backs in the country, and they've got the defense. I mean, their defense last year only gave up 313 yards per game, so they're solid. I've got Rutgers up there as a team that's going to be much better than expected, and that is a very dangerous game for Nebraska. But it is in Lincoln, which I like, so I've got Nebraska a 6-point favorite in that game.
Hey, one final one. We'll get you out here. Most Accurate magazine, last 29 years, well documented. Give us a team that you're high on that maybe others are not.
I'm gonna give you one team that I think could surprise a lot of folks this year, and that's Utah. And when you look at Utah, last year they lost 5 games, but we go back to schedule. Last year they had most of their big games were on the road, where they're not as dangerous as they are in Rice-Eccles. This year, the majority of the tough games are at home in Rice-Eccles. The road games are winnable. Last year, they didn't have a quarterback that could really throw the football. Cam Rising was lost, didn't even play last year. Brandon Rose's backup didn't play. Now they've got Rising back, Rose back. They add in Sam Word. They're going to actually have a pass game this year. Every time I talk to Whittingham, they've got an outstanding offensive line, defensive line, and they're taking a step back down in competition, actually. I thought the Pac-12 was one of the best conferences in college football last year. Now they're going to the Big 12, much more winnable. I could make a point for them running the table this year, winning the Big 12, and being a big-time contender, despite the fact they're not going to be in anybody's preseason top 10 this year.
Great stuff. Phil, as always, we appreciate the yearly conversation and, of course, the yearly Bible. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll check back in once we get into the season.
Hey, a lot of fun talking football with you guys. And, hey, let's get Nebraska to win some of those close games, huh?
Preach.
Phil, look what you're doing around here.
Yeah.
Hey, be good, my man.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. A lot of fun as always.
That is Phil Steele.